Welcome to another edition of Inspired Stories, where leaders share their experiences so we can learn from their successes, how they've overcome adversity, and explore current challenges they're facing.
Welcome to another edition of the Inspired Stories podcast, where leaders share their experiences so we can learn from their successes and be inspired by how they've overcome adversity. My name is Anthony Codispoti, and today's guest is Gerald Tritt, co-owner of Vera's Burger Shack, which started out as a beach concession in 1977 under the watchful eye of Vera and her husband Frank. Vera prided herself on serving the best possible food, and as she got older, they handed it down to their granddaughters. Eventually, Gerald, who was a family friend, and his partner, Noah Cantor, became involved. They have maintained Vera's commitment to providing an excellent customer experience that turns people into returning customers by using only the best ingredients and making the burgers fresh themselves. They have been voted Vancouver, Canada's best burger 15 years running. They have 10 locations and counting and are actively engaged in franchising conversations. Gerald also has a wider range of other interests, including a cigar brand, which we'll hear more about, and is the president of Jolt Health, a health and wellness company which is currently engaged in identifying opportunities in the AI space in regards to medical development. Now, before we get into all that good stuff, today's episode is brought to you by my company, Add Back Benefits Agency, where we offer very specific and unique employee benefits that are both great for your team and fiscally optimized for your bottom line. One recent client was able to add over $900 per employee per year to their bottom line by implementing one of our proprietary programs. Results vary for each company, and some organizations may not be eligible. To find out if your company qualifies, contact us today at addbackbenefitsagency.com. Now, back to our guest today, the co-owner of Vera's Burger Shack. Gerald, I appreciate you making the time to share your story today.
Thanks for having me, Anthony. Happy to be here.
So, Gerald, tell us in your own words, what is the customer experience like at Vera's?
It's a warm and friendly experience. I think we're not the type of company that gets out there and, flashy, screaming, yelling, a lot of hoopla. We provide an experience that's friendly, inviting, and most importantly, quality.
That's terrific. Now, to win Best Burger once is impressive. To win it 15 years and counting is kind of absurd. What are you guys putting into those things?
Well, good question. We've been making the burgers by hand in store every day since we started. That for us is a non-starter in terms of having somebody else produce our products for us. We also built a proprietary spice mix that we put into every burger. The difference in our burger as well is we charbroil them. We don't griddle them. They're not smash burgers. They're your sort of thick steakhouse style burgers. And I think that people appreciate that. Every burger is over 6 ounces. We don't skimp on the ingredients. We don't skimp on the quality. We make sure we only use top tier ingredients. And I think for that, people respect it, and people respect the fact that we care greatly about the burger.
So the cooking process, it's on a traditional open flame grill. Is that what you were describing?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And 6 ounces, that's a pretty good sized burger.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm not a small guy. My partner's not a small guy. Vera and Frank weren't small people, and it was one of those things where we're not going to make food that we're not going to eat, and it's as simple as that. And we didn't want these 2.5 ounce patties that were frozen, that were made by somebody else. And it's funny, over the years, every beef provider within Western Canada has come to us and say, "Oh, we should make your patties," and my partner and I always laugh. We're like, why would we let somebody else make the one thing that you're coming for? We don't make ice cream. We don't make ketchup. We buy those things. We make our patties. So
you're buying fresh ground beef and molding it into
Correct.
the shapes and mixing all the spices
Correct.
in and doing it right there on site.
Yeah. And anything we can do to make that product even a little bit better, we do it.
So what was the opportunity that unfolded that allowed you to get involved with Vera's? Had you been in the restaurant space before? How did this all come about?
So I was in the restaurant business for a number of years across Canada, and I owned a tapas bar here in Vancouver. And around 2000, Vera's the last single granddaughter that lived in Vancouver was getting married and going to be moving away. and they had 1 year left on the contract on the beach concession. So I spoke to them and I took over the beach concession, and I did it for a couple of reasons. In 2000, the burger landscape was very different than it is today. There was nobody doing a real sort of charbroiled, and I'm not going to say gourmet burger, but upmarket burger. And so I took the concession over with the thought of, let me see what this is all about. Let me see if there's legs to this. Let me see if there's something there. And so I ran it for the first season. It was great. It was a successful season. It was good timing for myself because my wife and I were also expecting our first child, who's not named Vera, but and so it was a good opportunity for me to sort of check out the lay of the land. Noah Cantor, who's my partner, had been friends with me for a number of years and played professional football up here in Canada in the CFL for the BC Lions. And he had always said, if there's an opportunity to maybe do something else, let me know. And so in 2001, a space became available, and I took the opportunity to approach Noah and ask him if he wanted to come in on that location with an opportunity to, if things went well, to buy into the company. So in 2001, we opened our first standalone restaurant, and 2002, Noah became my partner, and we've been partners ever since.
And so you guys are up to 10 locations now? Is that right?
Yeah, we have 10 locations, and we're just about finished one in Calgary, Alberta.
Is that the first one outside of the Vancouver area?
Yeah, we had one in Calgary a few years ago in the stadium redevelopment area in Edmonton. It was a casino that licensed us, and that casino pulled out, so we pulled out with them.
Okay. And so is it the burgers that is really what is getting people to come in the door? Is that what people are talking about? That's the hook?
I think, well, I mean, obviously the hook is the burgers, and we're Vera's Burger Shack. Obviously the hook is the burgers, but it's everything. Our fries are fresh cut, double fried. Our patties are fresh. We use potato buns. We don't, we use Hellman's mayo. We use, Heinz ketchup. We use French's mustard. Our burger experience isn't just the burger. Like, it's everything that's sort of layered on. We use real cheddar cheese. We don't, and we're not for everybody. There's a market, obviously. Look at the other guys out there that are using American cheese, smashing the burgers down as thin as you can get, and there's a huge market for that. Maybe we're wrong, but this is the burger that I want to eat. This is the burger my partner wants to eat, and ultimately, this is the burger that I think that when people really want an exceptional burger experience, the one they're going to turn to.
So where do you want to go ahead, Gerald?
We don't scrimp. We don't cut corners. I don't want to use, that's a line from Dave Thomas from Wendy's, which is why he made his burgers square. We don't cut corners. It was a great line when I heard it. I'm like, that's a great line, but I can't make square burgers. But it's, for us, it's about being up to quality, not down to a price.
Focus on quality. Yeah, you usually don't go wrong there. So where do you want to take the concept from here, Gerald? What's the growth plan?
For us, we're a BC-based company. We've looked at the States in the past. If there's opportunities there, we'd certainly engage them. But for us, our focus is Western Canada. We've got one store opening in Calgary. We'd like to get a second and third one. We'd like to open up and expand throughout Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and really create a Western Canadian footprint. I think that's, our backyard, so to speak. And I think there's real opportunity there.
How many of the locations are corporate owned versus franchises?
Now they're all franchised.
Okay.
It was a decision that we made during the tail end of COVID.
Mm-hmm. How did you guys sort of manage that through the COVID time?
We managed well because we didn't wait for the fight to come to us. We brought the fight to it. And what I mean by that is, as soon as we sort of saw things happening with COVID that we felt were going to be game changers, we adapted. We engaged the delivery services, all of them. We talked to our franchisees. We worked out some accommodations with our franchisees before they got to that point where they were struggling at all. And because we were proactive about it, because we got ahead of it, we managed it well. we managed to survive and thrive through it. So.
And so are you actively searching for new franchisees?
Yes.
Specifically in Western Canada?
Listen, Western Canada is our preferred space, but we'll take Vera's anywhere, and we're pretty sure that everyone will like them anywhere.
Okay. So for people who might be listening now, they're considering different franchising opportunities. What is it about the Vera's concept that is particularly compelling?
Well, I think that it's the fact that it's a product everyone can stand behind. I think that's the most important thing. You know, one of the reasons I got into the business, the hospitality business period, was because you can't fight a good plate of food. You can stand behind it. You can be proud of it. You can feel good about it. And there's a lot of businesses out there that are just, you go through the motions. If you own a dry cleaner, you're standing behind the quality of your cleaning, but you're a dry cleaner. It's a good business, but you're not handing somebody a folded shirt saying, "Look at that shirt. Doesn't that shirt look great?" There's
no emotion behind that, huh?
There's no emotion behind it. If I put a plate of food in front of you and I watch you take that first bite of a burger and you are just like, "Wow, that was great." That inspires me. And that should inspire any franchise partner that we have, because that's how we feel about it. That's how we feel about our franchise partners. That's how we feel about our food, our customers, and that should trickle down.
Okay. I'm curious, in the time that you've been involved with Vera's, obviously it's grown from a single, beach concession stand to now 10 locations. What are some innovations that you've introduced to Vera's since getting involved?
So a couple of things. So when we first got involved, we were, up until we had 3 or 4 stores, we were hand forming our patties. And then we got it was called a Hollymatic, and it was an automated burger machine with a big hopper in front. So we'd mix all the meat, put it in the hopper, and it would spit out all these burgers, perfectly formed, round pucks, beautiful. Round about 2007, 8, we sort of looked at them when they were sitting on the grill. My partner and I were like, they look great. They're really tightly packed. They're these really like perfect, too perfect patties. And so I said, you know what? I think we can do better here. And we built this plate, basically. We threw this $15,000 patty machine out the window, basically, and built these $60 stainless steel plates, and with a handle on the top of them. And we made meatballs, big 6-ounce meatballs, and then we used those plates to form the patties. So every patty looks a little different, isn't quite packed as tight, so the juice flows a little differently in them, and they felt more home style. So that was a big, for us. I mean, it's silly now to think about it,
but it almost looked too industrialized before.
It looked too industrialized, and people were taking that position like, "Oh, now that you're growing, you must be using frozen patties." And we had to sort of take a half step back and say, "No, we don't. We'll never do that." So it was sort of, it's silly to think about now, but it was just one of those things, And then, I mean, going back to French fries, oh my God, the amount of work we did in terms of figuring out our French fries and how to fry them right and get the right temperature, the right crisp, the right feel inside, because we use fresh potatoes. That was a work in progress. I mean, and we were, our first fries coming out were terrible. We were hitting them with 12 different types of spice to try to cover up the fact they all tasted a little burnt. And it's, when I think about all the things that we went through to get to the quality of the product that the average consumer gets now, it is one of the reasons that I get so worked up if I see something where somebody says the fries weren't crispy, or somebody says the burger was greasy.
You take that personal.
Like, I take it personally. I take it personally for a lot of reasons. I take it personally because I'm first of all, I'm a proud guy. I want to do good work. But second of all, we care more than anybody about that burger that you're about to eat. And when somebody speaks ill of our product, it's
like bashing one of your kids. Yeah.
Yeah, it hurts me to my core. So
You mentioned before that the fries are double fried. What does that mean?
yeah,
Like two different
so that
oils, two different
no, that means basically we blanch them in hot oil so they get cooked, and then we take them out of the oil and we let them cool, and then when you order your fries, we fry them again.
Oh, so they're like steaming hot.
Yeah, so what happens when they come out of being blanched, they're basically just about cooked, but they're not crispy.
Okay. So you
And
need to
and then
finish
when
them off. Yeah.
you finish them off, and so what happens is when they come out hot like that with a little bit of oil on them, the steam actually helps cook the inside of the fry. So when you take those fries and you put them back in, that second fry crisps the outside, and the inside is soft.
Now, I'm not a chef. I've never operated a restaurant before. I did work at a Wendy's once as a teenager, but I've never heard of this idea of double frying a potato. Was this an innovation that you guys came up with yourselves, or how did you
No,
discover
no,
this idea? This has been around
no.
for a while.
Lots.
Okay,
It's
this is
been
well
around for a
known.
long, long time.
Okay,
Yeah, it's just there's depending on the potato that you're getting, the type of potato. If there's too much sugar in the potato, it can get black very quickly. So when you're doing the double fry, if it's the wrong potato, it'll look burnt. It'll taste great, but it'll look burnt.
okay.
Have you ever been to Quebec?
I have not. Oh no, I have
Okay,
Montreal. I've been there
so
once.
Montreal, yeah. So the if you had French fries there, you would have noticed they're darker. The potatoes they use there are higher sugar content.
Interesting.
So when they fry them, they get naturally darker.
Interesting.
Yeah, we learned a lot about potatoes when we were coming up with our fry
And so,
recipes.
where do your potatoes come from?
Our fries are Kennebec potatoes
Okay.
from Canada, and then during the growing season, the last bit of the growing season gets shipped over from California when they're turning over the growing season. Kennebec potatoes have one harvest, so they harvest them all at once, and then they go through them through the course of the year.
Got it. Talk to me about store openings. You guys do anything fun or outrageous when you're opening a new location? Try to get some attention?
We don't really. I mean, we are not the type of people that have the big cow standing out front handing out burgers and stuff like that. We tend to, we'll do gift certificates, we'll do giveaways, we'll do social media announcements. Our biggest thing is we give away these things called burger bucks, where we just go out and we just hand them out, and they're $5 or $10 for opportunity for people to come in and try the product. Our general feeling is you come in, try the product once, you're going to come back and have it again.
Makes sense. Let's shift gears for a moment. I'm curious to hear more about this cigar brand. How did you get involved with that?
So, Freud cigars, named after Sigmund Freud.
Okay.
I got involved in that I've been friends with some guys for 20 years now, and they're heavily invested in public markets here in Canada, and it's a family office. And about several years back, we were having a birthday party for one of them, and we were having cigars, and everyone loved the cigars, and everyone went about their merry way. And then the senior partner of the company was in Greece and having a cigar, and he's sitting there at the Four Seasons Hotel having a cigar, and all these other guys are having cigars, and he's like, "This is a great experience." And he sort of said, "Well, maybe I want my own cigar company." And it was sort of born out of that. And then it turned out he had a contact who had been in the cigar industry, who was on the shelf, and so he talked to them, talked to his primary partner. They started the cigar company, and then they brought me in to look at building an alcohol side to the company. And sort of we successfully developed that. That's on the shelf right now, getting ready to launch. But
What type of alcohol?
It's going to be, our first release is going to be a bourbon.
Okay.
And as the cigar company started ramping up, they asked me to get more involved in the cigar company to the point where I'm involved daily on the cigar company side of things.
And so tell me, what is the distribution like? Tell me more about the brand for people who know cigars. What would be the differentiator here with your product?
So we created a brand, Freud Cigars. The name of the brand came out of building a brand around somebody who was a prolific cigar smoker. And not a lot of people know this, but Sigmund Freud smoked 20 cigars a day.
Oh my gosh.
He had a cigar lit almost every day. And so what happened was we built this company. We launched the first cigar April 2021, called it the Super Ego after one of Freud's concepts, and launched that in New York. And gradually the line has grown where we've got 4 different cigars, 9 different sizes. And we started a secondary company called Carlos and Maria, which has 2 different cigars, 5 different sizes. We've been rated in Cigar Aficionado. We've been mentioned in Cigar Aficionado 15 times. They're all Dominican cigars right now, and we have 2 fantastic blenders. If any of your fans have heard of Davidoff cigars, the master blender for Davidoff cigars for over 30 years is a gentleman by the name of Eladio Diaz. He's blending for us now. One of his understudies, Weaver Ventura, and one of his blending partners is William Ventura. So Weaver Ventura is also blending for us. So, one of the reasons why I got aligned with the cigar company is because the philosophy of the cigar company is very similar to the philosophy of Vera's. It's up to equality. We got great blenders doing great tobaccos, doing interesting blends, and it's grown from there to the point where we're 140 retailers across the U.S., some big, some small, some well-known, some not so well-known. We're in 15 different countries and growing daily.
I've been looking at your site here as you were explaining all of that, and the product is beautiful. It's the packaging is
You're looking at the Sigmund?
I am. Yeah.
Yeah, the Sigmund packaging, the Sigmund box, that's a limited edition cigar we launched on Sigmund Freud's birthday last year. And it's a great cigar.
And when you talk about the blenders and the blending that is taking place, these are different varieties of tobaccos that have been prepared differently. Talk a little bit more about that.
So one of the things that as I got more involved with the cigar industry, I sort of, did my homework, did my research, did a small cigar sommelier's course so I could learn and speak in an educated manner about the cigars. And what you really learn is how many different styles of tobacco leaf there is, what makes a good wrapper, what makes a good binder, what makes a good filler, why cigars burn the way they do, why the cigars don't burn the way they do. There's our director of international sales, Manny Diaz, is Eladio's son. And he's a walking encyclopedia himself about cigars. He took a cigar apart for us, showed us each layer of the cigar, why this one burned, why this one didn't burn. It is, in cooking, they say cooking is art, baking is science. Cigar making is both. Because you have to understand why the tobaccos are going to be layered the way they are to get the flavor profile that you're going to get. But you also have to understand the science of why you need to use this part of the tobacco tree or plant to use your wrapper, your binder, your filler. And it is really an interesting science when you break it down.
So I'm not a cigar guy myself, but I have many friends who really enjoy it. If I was looking for a gift for somebody that, hey, this is something a little bit different, a little bit special, is it the Sigmund here that you would recommend?
Well, the Sigmund, the Agape, if you can find it, that's just about finished in terms of its exclusivity. We don't have many boxes of that left. So when you find an Agape, you should definitely grab one. And the Sigmund, the Alter Ego is a really interesting cigar for us because We use some very interesting tobaccos in that. We used a tobacco called Pelidoro, a hair of gold. It's based on a Peruvian strain of a very hard to get tobacco. So it's got a very different flavor profile. That to me is like, if you put a gun to my head and say, who's your favorite? Probably the Alter Ego Robusto,
Okay.
just because it's got the Mexican San Andreas wrapper, which is a little oilier, a little darker. It's got the Pelidoro tobacco inside. I tend to gravitate towards that. The Sigmund's an excellent cigar, but the Sigmund's a commitment because it's a double Corona, so it's a longer Vitolo, so that you definitely have to be committed to sitting there for an hour and a half. But the picture that I always paint for people with the cigars is, you come home from work, had a stressful day, you'll pour yourself a cocktail, pour yourself another. After an hour and a half, 2 hours, you might have had 4 or 5 cocktails and you're sort of wound down for the evening. You have a cigar, you pour yourself a drink, you go sit on your back patio, you'll sit there for an hour, you'll have 1, maybe 2 drinks, have the cigar, and you are way more relaxed and feeling way better than if you're having 4 or 5 drinks. It's
You moderate a little bit more on the alcohol side, and then the effects from the tobacco just kind of
it's a natural moderation because you've got something else to sort of take your attention away. And I'm telling you, sitting on your back porch, having a cigar and a drink and watching the sun go down, nothing relaxes you more.
And that's, of course, shortly after you've just had a nice Vera's burger to fill up your belly for the night.
Well, you have that for lunch to get you through the rest of the day.
I like it. So people can find these cigars. Can they buy directly from your website, or are they only through the retail distribution that you've got?
Retail distribution, but there are online retailers as well that have them, that carry them. I think Cigars Direct carries them online, so they're a good contact. But locally, I mean, I know that there's retailers in Columbus that carry them. I know that there's retailers across, I think we're in 40 odd states. And we'll be launching a new cigar in early 2025. News about that one is going to be coming out in the coming weeks. And I think that's going to be a real interesting collaboration that we're doing with a very well-known person.
Okay. And people can they can make sure they can find out more about it by is there some place on your website that they can sign up for information?
You can go to our website. You can go. The best thing to do is follow us on social media.
Okay.
Instagram, Freud Cigar Co.
Great. And what's the growth plan for this? Is it just to continue sort of some of these interesting collaborations, like you just mentioned, the one coming out in 2025? Are there more retail outlets coming?
We'll add retail stores. We'll add more countries for distribution. We'll add more cigar lines as we grow. We're slowly moving to Europe as well. And so I think that for us, it's about continuing to keep our core blends in stock and ready to go for the consumers that use those and enjoy those as their sort of daily and weekly smokes, and continue to provide interesting blends for limited editions and make those, really inspired.
Right. I want to shift gears again, and this time I want to hear more about Jolt Health. As we described it in the intro, this is a health and wellness company currently engaged in identifying opportunities in the AI space in regards to medical development. What does that mean?
So, one of the things that's happening right now in the world, obviously everybody hears the term AI. And, then you're going to start hearing about AGI, which is now starting to, hit mainstream as a concept. What's so special about AI it's not how quickly AI is developing. It's how many different things are being developed through AI. And, there's opportunities with the right precepts, the right concepts put into the AI mind, so to speak, and having antagonistic entities that push back against each other. AI really does spin the wheel very quickly in terms of development in all segments. And we're seeing that now within medicine, where you're starting to see certain vaccines, certain medicines being developed almost through the concept of giving the parameters writing the parameters in code, and then allowing an AI module to develop an idea, because it doesn't have any preconceived notion of what should or shouldn't work. If you just push everything into if you just push all of the information into it and let it run, it will sometimes surprise you. And it did. There is, I can't remember the name of it. Halcyon was the first AI generated antibody, and it was strictly done by AI, with the concepts being put into the system and allowing the computer to do its work. And the way it works is it's almost in simplified forms. It is having a computer that says yes to everything, and then having a counter computer saying no to everything. And they sort of push back against each other and fight. And in that process, in that antagonistic process, it learns really quickly. And that's how they did it with chess. That's how they've done it with checkers. And it turns out you can apply that theory to just about anything where it's learned machine learning. And for medical, we're now seeing it. We're seeing it live and in person. And so for Jolt Health, we've had several things involved in the company over years, and we just sort of looked at it and said, this is the direction that it needs to be. This is where medicine is going. This is where medical development is going. This is what the next 10 years is going to be. And we've identified some core assets that we think that would be good, and we've identified some key people that we think would be outstanding in terms of helping us on that journey.
And so what does this look like? Is there an ultimate product that's on the horizon?
The interesting thing about AI is once we've identified and finalized any agreements with an acquisition partner, we'll determine that as we go down the road.
And so paint a little bit more of a picture for me. Help me understand where the company is now, where you want to take it. What is it doing in the moment?
It's a nascent company right now. Okay. It's a shell. And
so early days, but you guys have got big plans.
Days.
Yep.
Yeah, and what we've done is, there were several things that we've looked at, several things that we looked to put into the company. And then for various reasons, we've decided that we really need to focus on the AI side of things. We really need to focus on the medical side of things, and that's what we've decided to do.
So if you and I talk again in, say, maybe 12, 18 months, what would you hope to have be the announcement at that point?
I would hope to have the announcement be that we're heavily involved in the development of something in the medical field that is AI driven.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll check back in with you later to see how this is evolving. So shifting gears again, in this show, we always like to spend at least a few minutes kind of delving into a personal or a professional challenge that you've overcome at some point and lessons that you learned on the other side of that. As somebody who's been involved in a wide range of businesses over the years, I'm sure that you've probably got a long list of things that bumpy roads that you've traveled. Can you think about one particular example of a challenge, either personally or professionally, that you've overcome and some things that you learned going through that experience?
I think that the biggest challenge that in everyone's day-to-day life, including my own, is that, if there's an issue, you have to deal with it. And I think far too often it's pushed to the back burner. It's moved to the side. Other things come up. And, small issues become big issues if you don't deal with them. And for us, and I've done it to myself. I've seen other people do it themselves, where if you don't handle the issues handle you. And I think that's the biggest takeaway from anything, is that if there's a problem, you deal with it and you move on, and you be honest about it, and you learn from the mistakes. I don't think, I always joke with some of the people I work with that when I'm perfect, everyone has to worry, but it's not going to happen for a while. So I think everyone's safe.
Everyone can relax.
Yeah, everyone can relax just for another week.
Yeah.
So,
Gerald, as business leaders, obviously we always have an eye on EBITDA, which is just a fancy term for profits, right? I'm curious in the different roles that you've been in to hear about maybe something interesting or creative that you've tried, either as a way to lower costs or increase sales, that might be fun to talk about.
well, I think in terms of Vera, one of the biggest things that we did very early on was we started procuring our own meat, and by making deals with the meat providers and cutting out the meat wholesalers, we were able to lock in more consistent pricing, and we've been able to protect our pricing in terms of the margins, I think, a lot better than others. For us, that was an important piece because it really did help us, meat is a commodity, and it helps us maintain a consistent price. Obviously we can't combat inflation, but we can at least offset it somewhat. And so, when we buy our meat, we buy it in bulk. We buy, trailers at a time. And for us, it enables us to maintain a price point for our meat, and it doesn't fluctuate quite as much as others would.
What's something you wish you could teach a younger version of yourself, Gerald?
You have to do your assessments faster, make your decisions faster, and don't allow things to linger.
Good advice.
I think the biggest thing that biggest mistake people make now is, again, it goes back to my previous comment. I think you tend to push things to the side and say, I'll deal with that later. And a lot of times that later is more painful.
Rip the Band-Aid off now,
so to speak. Yeah.
Gerald, in a competitive job market, recruiting and retaining good employees can be really challenging. I don't know if you are experiencing the same kind of labor shortages in Canada that we are in the States, but I'm curious to hear about something maybe that you've tried and found success with to help both recruit and retain good staff.
Well, I think that generally speaking, at this point, because we don't own any stores where everything is franchised, it's no longer sort of part of my day-to-day purview. However, when we did have stores, one of the things that we always did was made sure that if we identified a good employee, they weren't at minimum wage for very long. We
proactively bump them up. You don't wait for them to come to you.
Again, the analogy of ripping the Band-Aid off. If you're waiting for somebody to come to you and ask for a raise, it's going to be more painful. If you give them a small bump before they think they've earned it, they're twice as happy with you, because that you've now given them a bonus instead of not met an expectation.
Mm. That's a good way to frame it.
And I think that's important, because if I make $10 an hour and I come to you and ask for a raise, I want 12. I'm not coming to you to get a raise from 10 to 10.50. But if you've identified me and I'm earning $10 an hour and I've been working for a month, and you say, hey, you know what, you're doing a really good job, Gerald. Here's $10.75. You're super happy. And I use those numbers, but meanwhile, I mean, the average wage, the minimum wage in Canada is in BC is around $17 an hour.
Okay.
So, which is, it's great because it does allow people a living wage, and that's important. But it's also tough because as a small business, you can only afford that for so many people. And if your business isn't thriving, that means you have to cut somewhere, and that cut is in quality. You can't afford. I had this conversation with my daughter, who's in law school, and we were arguing about a living wage, and I said, living wage is important, but if you can only afford two people, so you can't give the customer service that you need to give, that means you either have to raise your price, which might not be competitive, or you have to have owner operators, or you perish. Now, if the wage was $12 an hour, you might be able to afford four people. So now your business is thriving, your price points are fair, and you've employed two more people. What's better? It's a tough nut to crack, because here in Vancouver, I don't know whether you know anything about Vancouver, but it is not an inexpensive place to live.
No.
And $17 an hour will barely get you over the finish line. So it's a tough environment. All of that being said, we've never had somebody on minimum wage for more than a month.
Okay.
If they're good, they've been given a raise.
If they prove themselves, you're holding on to them. You want to give them that bump right away.
Yeah.
Gerald, what's a fun fact most people would know about you?
A fun fact most people wouldn't know about me? Oh my gosh. I think I'm a pretty open book.
Yeah, everybody knows your skeletons.
I think most people would say he talks too much.
Quite the gabber you are, huh?
A fun fact most people wouldn't know about me. I can be far more disciplined than people give me credit for being.
Okay, you come across as a fun-loving, sort of shoot from the hip kind of a guy, but underneath the layers, there's a strong discipline, good work ethic.
Right.
There, huh?
Right now, I'm in the middle of something called 75 Hard because somebody challenged me to do it.
And what is that?
Work out twice a day, stick to a diet, no cheat days, no drinking any alcohol, read 10 pages of nonfiction, drink a gallon of water for 75 straight days.
How many days into it are you?
Day 63 now.
Oh, you're almost through it.
Yeah.
How do you feel?
You know what? I feel probably the same as I did beforehand,
Okay.
which is shocking to most of my friends, other than the fact that I've lost some weight. So.
Okay. Well, that's got to be helping you out in some ways.
Yeah. My wife didn't believe I'd be able to stop drinking just like that. So.
Now, do you still enjoy the cigars? Is that on the allowed list?
Yeah, that's not on the off list. So.
Good. That's got to help. Gerald, any specific mentors, books, or learning experiences that have been helpful in your personal or professional career?
I wouldn't say there's any specific mentors or books. What I've always tried to do is I read a lot. I read every day. I read the news, not just one source, several different sources every day. I listen to audiobooks. I read regular books. I'm pretty voracious about that on a day-to-day basis. And I try not to lock myself into any given concept. I'm open to any discourse about anything. And if somebody has a better point of view or can show me a better concept, I'm open to it. I don't particularly I'm idea agnostic. I have opinions, and my opinions are formed, I believe, based on 360-degree learning. So I can't, I firmly believe in the concept of, walk in somebody else's shoes before you form an opinion of them. Mm-hmm. I firmly believe in, how you treat people that can't do anything for you is how you treat everyone. Mm-hmm. And, I firmly believe in that you never stop learning. And those are sort of the things that I try to instill in my kids. I try to instill in my business. I'm not perfect. I still learn every day. I expect if we had this conversation in 6 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years, I would probably think differently about some things, because I think that you can't if you don't evolve, then you become extinct.
I think this is an important point, and I think it's something that most people would like to believe about themselves, but is really challenging in practice. This idea of being open to having your mind changed. I mean, it's pretty rare to go into in my experience, it's pretty rare to go into a conversation with somebody, especially about something maybe political or, something that's really divisive, and have them come in with this viewpoint, but then hear somebody else's viewpoint, and you're like, oh, that's interesting. Right? Is there something that sort of helped you sort of develop that mindset and being open to having your mind changed?
Coming from a broken home.
Okay.
I think, I think it's one of those things where you sort of, as I, nobody is perfect in this world. And I think that the moment that you think you're 100% right is the moment that you fail. And I think that there's multiple truths to every story. There's multiple stories to every truth. And I think it's critical that people, I tell my kids, I have 3 kids, and I tell them all the time, what's getting lost in this world that we live in currently is an inability for discourse. It's an inability to have a conversation where I don't agree with you, but I respect your opinion. And
and can allow you to have it.
Yeah. I don't judge you for your opinions. I judge you as a person. You're a good person. I have tons of time for you. You're interesting, you're engaging, you're funny. I have tons of time for you. If you're going to stand there and tell me there's only one way to be and there's only one way to act, and that is infallible, then I don't have a lot of time for you, because you're not a person that's going to ever think about things in sort of other than in a linear fashion. And that's not how life works.
Amen to that. I'm curious, you said what allowed you to sort of develop this mindset was coming from a broken home. Was this sort of like an environment where it was like mom had one story, dad had another story? I had to learn to kind of be able to hold both of those maybe opposing stories in my head at the same time?
Here's what I'm going to say is, I half joke about that, but one of the things that it allowed me to do is become an observer. And, I like to be engaged in the story, and I like to have fun. I like to have a good time, but I equally like to stand at the back of a room and just watch. And I think that's because sometimes if broken homes aren't always nice and easy. Sometimes they're volatile relationships, and sometimes you just need to stand in a corner and watch.
Wow.
And I think that's important. I think we all have this idea of getting involved, and sometimes people get involved when they shouldn't. I've done that, and if I brought my wife in here, she'd tell you I did it yesterday. But sometimes you need to stand back and just watch.
It's something else you said that really resonates with me is this idea that we should always be learning. And I don't know how old your kids are. I've got 2 boys who are 8 and 9, and that's something I regularly try to impress upon them. So I think they have this sense of, once they graduate high school, once they graduate college, once they get to be a grown-up, they'll be done learning. They won't have to go to school anymore. They'll know everything. And that's something that I really try to impress upon them. I'm like, hey, I'm 50 years old. And I said, if I'm doing it right, every day I wake up, I am learning something new. Like, you never stop, because when you do, I think you collect moss, you grow mold, and you do a quick decline. And so I'm curious, as a father, how old are your kids, and how have you been able to impress those lessons upon them?
So I've got a 23-year-old, a 21-year-old, and a 19-year-old. And how I've been able to impress that upon them is going through the frustrating act of having arguments with them. And it's, I'm a believer, I am a strong believer in discourse and having the arguments and having the discussions and getting, as I say to my wife, our kids need to be independent thinkers. I said, the problem with independent thinkers is they have their own opinions. And those don't necessarily align with us. And that to me, but it's somebody posited the question to me, if you drop dead tomorrow, what do you think your legacy would be? And I said, I think that my legacy would be, I've got 3 kids, it'll be just fine. They might be sad that I'm gone, they might be upset about it, but they'll be just fine. They form their own opinions. We've allowed them to fail. We've allowed them to succeed. They've done it on their own accord, their own merits. We haven't helicoptered them. We've seen them get upset about things. We've seen them be happy about things. But most importantly, we've seen them drive their buses. I have a niece that got married very young, and I had a difference of opinion of whether she should get married that young. And I just said, look, at the end of the day, you're going to write your own story. And I think that's the most important thing. Everybody needs to write their own story. Is it a good story or a bad story? Well, it's still being written. You can change your story today. That's the way it is. That's the way life is. Your story isn't over until you close your eyes for the final time. Up until that day, you can change your story every day. It's dependent on you.
I like that a lot. Gerald, I've just got one more question for you, but before I ask it, I want to do 2 things. First of all, if you're listening and you like today's content, please hit the subscribe, like, or share button on your favorite podcast app. Gerald, I also want to let people know the best way to get in touch with you. We've already mentioned Freud Cigars, Vera Burgers. Somebody wants to reach out to you, and Jolt Health, but if somebody wants to reach out to you directly, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Email me at geraldtritt@gmail.com.
So it's Gerald, Gerald, Tritt, Tritt.
Yeah, at gmail.com.
At gmail.com. Great. Okay, so last question for you, and we can focus on one of the 3 businesses or all 3 of them as you think about answering this question. But I'm curious, how do you see the industry that you're involved in evolving over the next 5 years? What are some of the big changes that you think are coming in those spaces?
So I think in the hospitality space, I think the big thing is going to be, I think the delivery apps will continue to grow. I think you're going to see some pushback on companies maybe doing their own deliveries and sort of cycling back to the way it used to be, where pizza and Chinese restaurants used to do their own deliveries, because I think that the amount of money that the delivery apps take off of the restaurants is significant, and as margins get tighter, that becomes tougher to do. So I think from that perspective, I also think you're going to see more varied influences. 25, 35 years ago, 40 years ago in the restaurant industry, the concept of fusion cuisine became the hot spot. I think that there is going to be more of that in terms of how food is prepared, how cooking techniques. So I think in the restaurant business, you're going to see some pretty wild stuff over the next 5 to 10 years. I don't think anything is off the table anymore. In terms of the cigars, I think the legislation is the toughest part, because people view cigars the same. They lump cigars in with tobacco, and it is tobacco in the sense of the word, but nobody is smoking 25 cigars in a day. Not like somebody who's got a pack of cigarettes have it. Plus the fact that you're not inhaling cigars. Cigars are more of an experiential thing. they're not as highly, in my opinion, they're not as highly addictive. If somebody said to me tomorrow, you can't smoke cigars anymore, I'd be fine with it. I wouldn't like it because I enjoy a cigar, but I wouldn't say, oh my God, how can I live without cigars? I'd have a tougher time giving up coffee than I would cigars. And so for the cigar industry, I think that the legislation stuff is tough. I really enjoy, I go to the States, I go to Las Vegas, I go to a cigar lounge in Las Vegas. I enjoy sitting there, having a drink, having a cigar, great environment. That's a good night. In Canada, you can't do that. In some states, you can't do that. It becomes, if I want to have a cigar here in Vancouver, I either have to be in my backyard or I have to be 10 meters from the front door of any building. There are no cigar lounges. They're not allowed. They have, here in Canada, we have brown paper, like plain paper regulations. So every cigar is overwrapped with a brown paper packaging. In a cigar store where no minors are allowed.
What's the point of the packaging? It's just to disguise what's in there?
Because they basically want to make it, they don't want to sell, they don't want you to be able to use the Sigmund box design as a selling feature for tobacco. So you're sort of looking at, it's silly because a cigar store itself, no minors are allowed in. So when people are walking in looking for a brand, they're looking for their brand. They're looking for the cigars that I like to smoke. They're not available. Or they are available, but you have to go through the entire humidor to find them. And because every cigar looks the same. Mm-hmm. I find things like that, you create layers of bureaucracy to make it more difficult for people to just enjoy themselves. And again, a cigar is not a cigarette. I can't stress that enough. A cigar is not a vape. I find, so for me, that's the bureaucracy, the legislation, the preconceived notions. Like there's talk of banning cigars for anyone born after a certain date. It's inconceivable for me to think that the government is going to say, Gerald, because you were born in 2008, you're never allowed to have a cigar, ever.
So your hope is that the momentum that some of this legislation has going in one direction, maybe you're hoping is that it sort of gets rolled back in another direction.
I think that society in general is a pendulum swinger. We swing hard one way, and then we got to swing back hard the other way, and then we got to find the middle somewhere. Is plain paper packaging good? I could see an argument for it. Banning cigar use for anybody, I mean, I would, at the risk of getting sued by Coca-Cola, I'd say that soft drinks are probably worse for more of the population than cigars are. Because more people have a soft drink addiction than they do a cigar addiction.
Interesting.
You're going to say that, what would happen if people said, if you're born after 2008, you're not allowed to have Coke. You're not allowed to have Pepsi.
Yeah, that would make quite a bit of noise.
If you look at, if you read the data, the amount of cigar smokers has grown marginally in the last 35 years. The amount of sugar consumed by individuals has grown by a factor of 10.
Skyrocketed, yeah.
What's worse for you?
Gerald, do you want to...
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to shift gears and see if you wanted to take a stab at this same question for the AI health company.
Oh, AI?
That's a tough one. I mean, 5 years, might as well ask about 5 months. Yeah.
It is the Wild West. The information cycle, the speed of computing is doubling almost every 18 months. It is literally the Wild West. I'm reading a book right now on it and how fast AI is developing and on how fast things are moving, and how, and the good and the bad of AI. And, Microsoft had to shut down one of their AI modules several years ago because it basically cycled into a rabbit hole that was racist, and started learning until the point where all it was spewing out was racist information. And it was such a nascent industry at that time that they ended up shutting the module down. That was the solution. Like, we just have to shutter it, because it can't unlearn what it's learned.
Oh, wow.
I found, like, the AI we don't even realize in a day-to-day operation how much AI is involved in our daily life. If you do a Google search on anything, business cards, all of a sudden, if you punch in something else like photographs, and in your list of things that Google comes up with, it'll say business cards with photographs on them. Because it's taken your search of business cards, and through its AI algorithms, it is now saying, well, if you're looking for photos, but you were looking for business cards, maybe you're looking for business cards with photos on them. AI is contingent on everything in our life. Waze, the GPS app for travel, that uses AI to tell you where to go and how to go. User input, and then it uses the user input of, there's a car accident over here, to tell you, instead of going over here because there's a car accident, which is a user input, that's a human input. But now AI says, your best route to get to your destination is going this direction now.
Gerald?
It's crazy.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. I want to be the first one to thank you for a really interesting interview. Appreciate you sharing your time and your story today.
Anthony, I appreciate you taking the opportunity to reach out, and I had a good time.
Yeah. Folks, that's a wrap on another episode of the Inspired Stories podcast. Thanks for learning with us today.